But I'm telling you, once I started doing this, understanding this, my connection to my client was light years ahead of where it ever was before. Why? I helped them understand something they didn't even know they had a problem with.
Hey, this is Blake Sloan. I've been selling real estate over 14 years. Our team of highly trained professionals, along with our unmatched marketing, has sold thousands of homes here in the Myrtle Beach area, and this is how we do it.
So there's this thing called the Iceberg Theory, and it really makes a whole lot of sense in regards to what it does, but the whole thing it wrote down says most people don't know what their actual problem is. Most people don't know what their actual problem is. Who do you think it is? Us in life, right? Me, when I got to be a part of Warriors in the beginning, I didn't really know what my problem was. I just knew my life really kind of sucked and I was pissed about it, right? On the outside, everything looked great. Business was great. Money was great, right? Everybody on the outside that saw things were great, but on the inside, I was miserable, right? This is years ago, but more importantly, your consumers the same exact way. They have some pain and problems and issues, but most of them just aren't really clear on what it is. And so when you're asking them what's the problem, what's going on, the reason you don't get a clear answer a lot of times is because what? They don't even know. And so that's the key part we want to look at. So there's really four main pieces we want to make sure that we have, and they're all 4 P's. Okay? Number one we talk about is problems. Where is that in our world, do you think? What is it? Oh, the reality is that's something that they're moving by. What makes them move? So on the buy side, what could that be?
Pain. Bigger family.
New job.
Bigger family, new job. They're relocating to be closer to family. Joe and I were talking about yesterday. That's one of the top reasons we get, right? They're locating to be closer to family. Something happened. We talk about number 4 is divorce. There's a lot of different reasons people have problems. Okay? There's 2 parts of this. Number 1, they're sedating so they don't even talk about it. Right? On the flip side, they don't even know exactly what it is, but they're unhappy in their scenario. And so it's very, very important from that scenario, right? And so he had an example yesterday, right? People called, reached out. One guy said they're having a divorce, went and met with a lady. She didn't even mention the word divorce. Perfect example of this scenario. And so this is where people screw up all the time, over and over and over. Second piece of the puzzle here is what the problem leads to, which is what? Pain. 100%. And so what happens is people don't tend to talk about pain a lot. Why? This is what the iceberg theory is about and kind of what happens. And so if you look at what happens is these 2 issues here, right, and how people operate lead to the third one. You got idea what the third one leads to? So patterns. And so what we want to look at, understand is that our clients or prospects tend to operate in these ways that they don't even understand. And it's a combination between going back and forth between their problems and the pain, or really understanding what they are and how they operate. And so that's kind of the key piece here. And so what most people do, though, in looking at kind of a simple way to look at this and talking about iceberg theory, is most people tend to just stay above here. Why is that? It's much easier to talk about the cool shit about our product and how the product works and how cool the product is and how many awards we got. But the problem is what?
It's not actually fixing.
It doesn't lead the client to the direction of able to fix the problem and help them come into really an epiphany of how to be guided going forward. If I can guide them and help them understand their problem better than they do, right, I can own their mind for life. Told that story a bunch of times. And so it's important for us to understand that we've got to be able to make sure that we can look at the problems and the pain, and we got to address this here, right? And able to come in and look at and identify the patterns. Because if you do it right, and if you've seen them doing this for a while, you notice that the patterns are always the same. Anytime somebody wants to come in urgently, want to cancel a buyer agreement or listing agreement, what's that mean? If they come in and demand to be released from an agreement that day, what happens? What's that mean? They're already working with somebody else. Every single time. I've been doing this for almost 20 years. Anytime somebody comes in and demands, and guess what they do every time? They lie about it, claim there's no one else, right? They say they're not going to buy or sell anymore, but they need to have a demand to be released that very day. And the pattern is what? They're lying, but you got to understand that there's certain patterns that are 5 or 6 or 7 ways that everyone operates in, and your job is to help find it. And it's so important to look at. And one of the things I wrote down is that most people aren't going that deep or asking that question is really helping them to get there. And so I want you guys to look at two things, right? You have the problem. You have the pain. Those two create the patterns. I've talked about this before. It's important. We got to spend 80% of the time talking about this. The deeper I'm willing to go in the basement down here, the more influence and ability to work with them long term I'm going to have. Right? And it's a perfect example that I already had this on the list to talk about. I actually had it on here for last week before I was out of town, but it's very important. Because if I don't go to that deep depth, right? It's a great example yesterday. He was talking about what happens if I don't go there. If they go with someone else, but even worse is what? I don't have the opportunity. You didn't have the opportunity to even picture the right way. Yeah. Right? You went in, past client, reached out to you. Husband had told about the divorce. Wife didn't even mention it. So we kind of do what naturally is easy thing for all of us to do is just connect with the client, talk to the client, show them that here's some cool stuff, we can help them. And then you're like, all right, this is great. And you leave and what happens? They say, oh yeah, by the way, we listen with some other agent in Surfside because he knows more people in Surfside. Like, that's the absolute worst way to pick an agent ever on the planet. Right? Look at the amount of residents in Surfside. Whoever knows people in Surfside, guess what? Most buyers that buy in Surfside, guess where they're not from? Surfside. But the difference is what? We didn't have the ability to go in and go deep underneath here to the iceberg. And this is not a thing. Everybody in this room has dealt with something like this. And so we got to dig in and understand, how am I not going deeper to understand? Because here's why. The deeper I go through here, and the more epiphany I can get my clients to in regards to their life and their situation, the more loyalty I'm going to have, and the deeper and longer they're going to stick with me as an agent. Through the ups and downs, through the multiple offers don't get accepted, I've got to be able to make sure I have the highest level of influence, but I've got to be willing to go deep in that basement and get down to the bottom of the iceberg. The iceberg is doing what? Talking about all the shit underneath the water that no one really wants to talk about. What does that take, though? What's that? Courage, right? It takes guts to go deep, make sure I understand, hey, what's really going on here? What you're telling me is really not lining up with what you're telling me on the backside. Right? Because most of the stuff we get in the first few questions are what? Bullshit. And so how do we help identify that? Is we got to look and understand the parts of what really gets to the piece here is I got to look and understand, what are the stories? What are the stories that they're telling me, that they're telling themselves, they're telling other people about the scenario that's going to help me mesh together the true hypothesis of what's really going on here. Does this make sense, you guys? Right? And so if I had to really get this is some higher level stuff here, but what most people are doing is they come in, they just sit right here. They talk about the cool stuff and the fun stuff, and oh yeah, you're having some kids and you want to move. They didn't tell you that they're about to get divorced because they're so stressed out about having 2 kids in the 1 bedroom in the apartment. And how miserable they are not having any space for each other. Right? They're not talking about those things. And so my job as a true influencer, as a true expert, is to do what? I got to start mining. I got to start digging to get to the bottom to understand what's really going on here and what are the deeper things. And here's the thing. This is called, I'm looking for the what? The cascade effect. What's that mean? I got to link the pain up. Usually goes to what? Balance, right? Relationship, marriage, kids. How are these decisions affecting you? If I don't make a decision, how's it going to affect you? If you don't move, how's it going to affect you? If you choose the wrong agent, how's it going to affect you? And so I've got to link up these pieces here, but I really want to just have you guys ask yourself questions today. Is like, how deep am I really going? And look back in your past 5 or 6 or 7 clients and say, look, how deep have I actually been willing to go to really make an influence to make a difference and influence these people? Because most people won't go deep because why? They won't go deep in their own pain and their own problems. And they're so sedated on the outside that you're not going deep enough because you don't go deep enough on yourself. And so it's uncomfortable, but in that scenario, I got to do what? Get comfortable being uncomfortable. But I'm telling you, once I started doing this, understanding this, my connection to my client was light years ahead of where it ever was before. Why? I helped them understand something they didn't even know they had a problem with. And if I help them understand something they don't know they have a problem with, what's that mean in terms of my ability to help them?
That you're going to get it done.
I'm the only person that can help them in their mind. And so the other agent who's coming in and telling you they're number one, right, and showing you this whatever it is, doesn't have a true effect if I'm able to get into their head, into their heart, into what's happening in their life, in their scenario, because now I'm a deep, true level consultant who's helping coach them through the scenario. I know, yeah, by the way, I'm a top agent as well on the top team, the top real estate team in Myrtle Beach. Verified by Real Trends, right? That's what makes a big difference in regards to how we operate and how we come here. We got to make sure we have that. What most people do, what most agents do, is they tend to talk about what? The possibility and the pleasure. They're spending 80% of the time talking about the possibility, which is what? We can help you. Here's how cool my shit is. Here's how awesome the product is. Here's how awesome I am. And ultimately, what do they not care about? Any of that. And so I want you guys to make sure you're flipping the script here, where 20% is only on the pain, is only on the possibility and the pleasure. Now, I really got to make sure I'm dug into that. But one thing that was a big aha for me, right, is that most people are just talking about how their stuff works, not really getting to the bottom of the iceberg. And so I want to give you guys a visual, and what it does, because I've got it, I'm looking for a word here, and what I do, we talked about the gap before a bunch of times, right? We talked about the gap. But I'm looking to do something when I get to that pain that really gets me influence. Right? So I have point 1 where they're at now. Point 2 where they want to get to. AK move, whatever it is. And this right here is the gap. I don't get to the true deep level of the gap unless I go where? To the deep problems and that deep pain. And I'm looking to create one thing here. I'm looking to create polarity. What do you think that means? I've got to be willing to take a risk to have polarity. The biggest influencers in life have polarity. What do you think that means? Who's somebody that creates polarity, you think? There's one person that creates polarity more than anybody on the planet. Donald Trump. Right? People hate him. But on the flip side, what happens? There's a certain level of people that have a super high loyalty to him, and they love him. That's an example of polarity. Most people, most agents are just weak, and they're in the middle where there's no polarity and there's no influence there. Okay, he's a nice guy. She's a nice lady. But we're going to go to our other person here, in Surfside. Right? Whatever the example is. And so we've got to be willing to get to the depth that's going to create the polarity, meaning it may be uncomfortable for them, may be uncomfortable for me, but that's how I have true leverage on them in the scenario. And to be able to help them. Does that make sense, you guys? And I want you guys to understand that there is no seduction, there is no influence without the gap. There's got to be, I have to have them in the gap to be able to create the seduction and the influence. And so one of the questions I ask myself, if I feel things getting squirrely, or they're not listening to me or going through, what do I have to realize? I got to ask myself the question of what? Am I in the gap? Do I have these people in the gap? And is there any polarity? A lot of you are wondering why your people start turning on you a month, 2 months in, or 8 months in. And you know what that means then? What? We no longer have them in the gap because what haven't we done in a long time? I haven't put them back in the gap. And why can't I put them in the gap? I don't even remember what the true pain is. Or the problem. I just know we've looked at 6 houses or 30 houses and wrote 8 offers and been under contract 2 times. They backed out 2 times. And so now we have some resentment between each side of us. Meanwhile, the real thing needs to be about what? Having the gap and understanding what's going on behind the scenes here. So instead of me talking about why our offers didn't get accepted, what am I talking about? How terrible is it for you still living in that rental 4 months now? Yeah. What's it like for your kids still having to share that extra room, whatever the problem is? What's it like having that shitty landlord who won't let you paint your walls? Yeah. What's it like not being able to be near your grandkids, watching them grow up and you just miss another birthday? Right? I've got to understand, instead of talking about the issues of what's going on and letting it get squirrely, I've got to have the data and the ability to take them back here to the gap every single time.